allowing us to do it. And guys, what do you think of the movie? Yeah. I'm going to show you them.
Best movie I've ever seen in my life.
Where are they? There they
Gotta
are.
see more movies.
Yeah. So they're there, and we have about 75 people on Zoom. So it's a pretty big group.
Decent turnout.
Yeah, great turnout. Let's see. I'm trying to make this full screen. Let's see where to do it. Okay, well, I guess I just won't. Oh, there it is. Chad, thank you. Welcome to Utah Valley University digitally. I'm so happy that you agreed to do this. I've been binging your movies, as have several all of us here, and I'm a big fan. And so that's what my first question is, if you don't mind us diving right into it.
Yeah. What was the question?
I didn't ask it yet. My first question was relating to what I was saying. It has to do with, Martin Bonner, Morse from America, and this are three very different movies tonally. I mean, they all have a very different sort of, feel, yet they're very similar in many ways. So my question has to do with tone and has to do with approach. And if you could just talk about, handling tone as a director and as a writer, and just what are some of your approaches to it?
Sure. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And yeah, they are very different movies, stylistically, tonally, content-wise, and that really appeals to me as a writer and a director and a filmmaker. The idea of building a career that's unpredictable and also presents fresh challenges for me every single time I get to make something. So it's definitely deliberate. And I just find that it's my opinion that the director should be building the tone and the style of a film out of its characters and the situations that they're involved with. So This Is Martin Bonner is about an old man starting over in a new town with no friends, and it just felt like that movie had to be quiet and still and leisurely paced. And then Morris from America was about a kid going through puberty and all these changes and being a foreigner in a strange land. And so that one felt like it needed to be much more fluid and have like an energy to it and be unpredictable in the sense that you never really knew whether the camera was going to do this or camera was going to do that, because that was kind of what I remembered being 13 feeling like. And then Little Fish, it was these characters going through this, awful time, but finding the love that they needed to get through it. And so that one felt like when they were together, there could be a lightness to it. But then anytime they were forced to confront the outside world, it would have to be a little bit colder, a little bit darker. And so just in general, I look at the characters and be like, what are they dictating the style and the tone of the movie should be? And that's how I try to accomplish it.
I love that approach. This is such a beautiful movie. All the movies are beautiful in their own way. Yeah, and I can't really. I just thought of this question as you were speaking, because when you were talking about Morse from America, there's two scenes that stand out in this film and that film for me as being as lovely as the films are. These scenes that are just so anxiously like hard to watch. And this one, it's the operation. In the room here, everyone was you could just see people freaking out, And for me, that scene with the pillow and the sweater and Morse from America is just like so hysterical and so relatable, so painful. What's going on here? Another person not muted?
Look.
Zach, mute yourself.
Gee.
Zach's vibing.
Thank you, Jenny. There is a way I could come here and go, participants, let me do this, and mute all. Oh, except then I'm muting Chad. I'm just gonna turn that off. Okay. Okay, so tell me about, I don't know if I have a question about that. Maybe that's just, how do you approach a scene like that? That's just, especially, let's talk about Morris from America for a while. A lot of people here maybe haven't seen that. But how would you approach a scene like that with a child actor?
Well,
in the scene, for those of you who haven't seen that film, I hope some of you watched it in the room. Lots of head nods here. Child in love with a slightly older teenager, 13-year-old child who has her sweater, puts it on a pillow and essentially makes out with it. Essentially starts dancing and then makes out with it. And and at any moment I feel Dad's going to walk in. Fortunately it doesn't happen. But how do you approach that particular scene with a child? That's a very sort of
I mean, it's funny. It's funny you bring that scene up, because the God's honest truth is that is the very first thing I came up with for Morris from America. That was the scene that turned into that whole movie. And it's just taken from my own life. I had a pillow humping phase when I was didn't think the Q&A was going to go here this early, but
hey, we start out.
I had a pillow humping phase when I was 12, 13 and got bored of humping my pillow. So one night I put some clothes on it and slow danced with it and tried to make a date night out of it. I would tell that story sometimes, that it always got a good reaction. So I was like, there's something to that. If you could really capture what's funny, but sad, but, tender and awkward, all those things about that moment, that's a great scene. So I started from there and I was like, okay, well, I'm probably talking about a coming of age movie. And I started pulling other experiences from my adolescence and the girl that I was in love with at the time. And I did move actually from Europe to the US when I was 13. So it snowballed from there. And when it came time to execute it, I was very nervous because that's a lot to ask of a young actor who's also doing his first movie. And we had a lot of jokes about it in anticipation as that day was coming up. And at the same time, I was secretly fretting, being like, how am I going to get him to do this right? But then on the day, take one, he went for it and really did it exactly the way it is in the movie. It was a closed set and he just got it. And so I didn't really have to do much.
It's a great scene, but I sat there the whole time going, excellent. Okay, I've got one last question. We'll turn it over to some of these folks. And that's about our mutual friend, Josh, our mutual friend, whose name I forgot, Josh Crockett, who edited your film. As I've watched this film now a few times, the editing stands out, so much. And there's certain things that you do, jump cuts, unexpected things throughout with the edit. Were those always in the mind? Did you shoot for them? And what was was there some discovery of that as you went? And talk a little bit about your relationship with Josh as you worked.
Yeah, Josh has been a friend for a long time, but this was the first time we worked together. And it was baked into the script and the DNA of the movie that it was going to jump around a bit. And so some of it was definitely shot to be able to seamlessly go from past to present and back again. But early on in the conceptualizing of it with my cinematographer, we decided that we did not want to have any strong visual indicator of where you were in the timeline. So not making a big difference between the present and the past, or perhaps a false version of the past, and trying to keep it relatively even keeled so that if it took you a second to realize you were in a flashback, that's fine. We wanted the cumulative effect of it to be that if you thought back on it, it kind of felt like one long dream or memory or thought. So because we took that approach, and because the DNA of the movie was already going to be jumping back and forth, it allowed us to do even more in editing. And we really could have edited it 1,000 different ways.
Yeah.
And tried many, many different ways. And the final cut is in a substantial different order than the shooting script was. And Josh does deserve a lot of the credit for that, for helping like figure out, well, this doesn't have to go from A to B in a strict narrative sense. So like it has to go from A to B on an emotional sense. And let's make sure we figure that out. So it's like the most satisfying journey possible. And he was great with that. But yeah, it's like all over the place and all out of order, which was fun. I really enjoyed the editing of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. It's so beautiful. Well, we've got questions from the group here. I'm going to ask here first, but then whoever's next, come here. And
are these all undergrad or grad students or both?
yeah, they're all undergrad, and they're gonna, when they come on, they're gonna make sure their video's on. They're gonna tell you their name, and they're gonna tell you like where they're in school or whatever. And Roan is first.
Hi, my name's Roan Oberg, and I'm a junior at UVU. And like Duane says, I've been binging your movies and looking at them for about the last week or so. And something I noticed going all the way from Luke and Bree Are on a First Date all the way to this film here is that you have a lot of scenes with characters who are going on, not necessarily first dates, but you kind of have a lot of scenes of characters getting to know each other. And a lot of times there's these awkward silences and awkward moments that creep through. And I really like them because I feel like they ground the scene in reality, and they make it really relatable. And my question to that sense is, what motivates you to create these awkward scenes, and what is your approach to directing them?
I think those scenes are normal. Does that make me awkward? No.
Oh.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, I probably agree. I feel like I'm always trying generally to have each scene feel natural and honest. So, to me, conversations in those situations are usually stilted and awkward. And it's also a way to find some humor and also to get some exposition out. It kills a lot of birds with one stone. So in the case of This Is Martin Bonner, letting him have that first date scene it satisfied a bunch of different things. It let you see him interact with a different type of person and see how he is in a romantic sense. It allowed me to drop some exposition about his band that I would pay off later, and yeah, just like sort of build character. That movie and also Morris, they're not so plot driven. They're definitely character driven first and foremost. And Little Fish is a bit more plot driven. But when you feel like there isn't plot to keep you going from scene to scene, then the thing that does keep you going from scene to scene is just building new parts of the character and finding out more things about them or something new about them. And so that's probably why I write scenes like that. It's like, okay, well, we've seen a bunch of scenes with him talking to this guy. Like, what else can we learn? What else can we see that's adding a different layer, a different shade? So that's probably the answer.
And what would you say your approach is to how you direct them? Like, what do you tell your actors, or how long do you hold on those moments when you're on production?
I've been lucky to work with a lot of great actors that I'm happy to let them do whatever they want to do first and see, and then only like step in if it's not right or not working. And a lot of times it will be right. I am one of those directors that believes a humongous chunk of the work is done in the writing and the casting. If you do both of those correctly, you should have not a whole lot to do on the set. And it could be more about experimenting on the set. So yeah, I mean, Paul Einhorn in Martin Bonner and Craig, Craig Robinson did that phone sex scene in Morris from America like perfect the first time. And I really didn't have to do anything. And then Jack and Olivia, we actually shot their date that's in the movie, their second date. That's the very, very first thing we shot. So like first take, first setup, first day. And it did take a little bit, to get the cobwebs out of that. And they'd never acted together before. And so some of that awkwardness is probably genuine and real as they're feeling each other out. So yeah, I mean, scheduling is also very important. And I try to be strategic in scheduling. So for example, Morris from America, the kid who's in almost every scene, had never acted before. So we deliberately scheduled it that all his like awkward stuff with the girl, we'd shoot that first. And then at the back half, we'll shoot the stuff with his dad when hopefully he's like gotten into the groove of being in front of a camera. So it's like, okay, if he's a little bit stilted in these early scenes, because that's what he's supposed to be. And then same thing with Little Fish. It's like, let's shoot this first date first. So Jack and Olivia can really kind of feel each other out in a way that if it's bad, maybe it works. So if you have the luxury to try and be strategic in scheduling, that's another great tool.
Would you say you also had a similar approach in the near end scene of Martin Bonner where Travis and his daughter are kind of having that lunch together?
Yeah, I mean, this is dumb, but I had fantasies about being so authentic with that I was like, what if these two actors never meet each other until we shoot that scene? And like, I'll just give each one of them a picture of what the other one looked like 12 years ago, and that's all they'll know. And then all of a sudden we'll roll, and then he'll sit down. That's not practical. So we didn't do that. But yeah, I mean, I honestly, that was 10 years ago we shot that now. So I'm struggling to remember like if on the day there was anything I really needed to step in for, but I think they could tell on the page that was written to be with a lot of pregnant pauses and like stop and try and, figure out what your next line is going to be. Yeah, I don't remember exactly though.
Awesome. Thank you for answering my questions. And I've loved all of your movies so far. I'm a big fan.
Thanks. Look forward to seeing your movies.
Hey, Chad. My name's Parley. I'm a junior, I think. So my question, I just got finished watching Morris from America today. And I read a couple articles where they talked about how you used your personal experiences. And you kind of talked about that a little bit, but just really wondering, is that something that you use often, where you kind of draw back on your personal experiences and how you use them, in your work and in your storytelling?
Yes, for sure. And especially the ones that I wrote, which is all of them except Little Fish. And yeah, so I started with Luke and Brie Are on a First Date, which for those who don't know is like a micro budget indie about two characters on a date, and that's the whole movie. So like the movie starts when the date starts and it ends when the date ends, and that is like literally based beat for beat on a real date that I had. So it's like 100% autobiographical. And because I felt like you got to write what you know. And then I had a bit of a philosophy shift in between that one and This Is Martin Bonner, where I heard a quote, I think it was by John Cassavetes, but I'm not positive, but it was saying, when it comes to making films, you shouldn't make films about what you know, you should make films about what you want to learn more about, because it is like a journey and you're going to spend a year or two writing it, doing it. And if you can be learning about a subject or a situation as you're going, that's going to be more fruitful for you and the audience. Like nobody wants to watch a movie where it's just the director like giving a sermon about something that he thinks he's an expert about. So I really took that to heart, and I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be being so literal in pulling from my own experience, but starting from there. What's something that happened to me, or what's a feeling that I felt, or something like that, and then working to try and take it away from me and put it in the hands of a different kind of person or a different character. And then you kind of are forced to test how universal it is. It's like, if it's something that happened to me and felt true to me, and I'm putting it in this avatar and it feels true to that person, then maybe it's a specific thing or feeling that everyone can relate to. So that became my new approach. And with This Is Martin Bonner and Morris from America and the stuff that I was writing, I was really trying to do that. Start from a personal place, but then, take it away from myself.
Sure. Last question, wondering if there's anything new that you're working on or futures to work on where you can give us maybe a sneak peek?
I haven't shot anything new, but I am working on a movie that would be a bigger movie, my first studio movie, that is like it's inspired by like 70s paranoia thrillers like 3 Days of the Condor or The Parallax View, which are movies that I really love, and I hope that happens, but who knows? It's a tough business out here, guys.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie to you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for answering my questions.
Yeah.
Okay, we have got Mr. Josh Beck. You want to pop in, Josh?
Yes. Hey, Chad. My name is Josh Beck. I'm also a junior at UVU. Love Little Fish. I'm also married and I cried in that movie. Just a little bit. My question was watching Morris from America and Martin Bonner. I was just kind of interested in your writing process because I feel like both of those movies are different culturally. So I guess what did you have to do to kind of, I guess, like how did you write those things that were so different from each other?
Yeah, well, it requires some research, but I honestly don't do much. Like, so in the case of This Is Martin Bonner, I'm writing a like retiree who is having a crisis of faith and has been very religious his entire life, and ex-con getting out of prison, who has an estranged daughter. Like, I'm none of those things. So I have to, when I'm writing it, sort of rely on what am I that these characters also are. I'm someone who has had to move and be new in a new town. I'm someone who's had to struggle to make new friends. I'm someone who has been felt lonely and away from family. So I'm confident I can like put that stuff in. And then when it becomes more specific, that's when I start to research. So in This Is Martin Bonner, I came up with the idea of like, I wonder what it would take to get your driver's license back if you went to jail for a DUI. So I researched that and put it directly into the movie. But that's sort of how I approached researching. It wasn't like do a bunch in advance that's general and then steal from it for the movie. It was more like, let's start writing the movie. And as things pop up, I'll like research that one like little thing. That way I'm not wasting a ton of time researching. And then Morris from America is not like, I didn't have to research anything like getting out of jail. But I did have to, again, like start from like, well, I've moved to a new place. Like I've had a crush on a girl that didn't like me back. I have a certain relationship with my parents and what's that like. But I'm not Black. I didn't grow up in Germany. I am not a father. I'm not a German. So I'm writing Germans, I'm writing fathers. That's what writing is. Writing is, coming up with a bunch of people that are different from you, unless you're writing a one-person stand-up show. And there's no like, I feel like there's no right or wrong way to do it. And it's a valid question when people are like, what makes you think you can tell this particular story? And I think that everyone can attempt to tell any story, and it's just a matter of like how well you do it. And certainly you have to be open to critiques from people that have lived those specific experiences. And if they say you didn't get it right, then that's totally valid. But the approach when I sit down to write is never to be afraid of writing different cultures or experiences, because that's you have to do it. Like, and I feel like sometimes I get it right and sometimes I get it wrong. I think I actually portrayed the Germans in Morris from America a little bit unfairly. After going through the whole experience of like living there for a year and making that movie, I was like, these Germans are nice. But they're all dicks in the movie. So I know it's often I don't know, it's a tricky subject now, and everyone wants to be delicate about what stories they attempt, but I feel like you got to give yourself freedom to try and fail. But that's the gig. I think writing is creating other people.
Thank you.
All right, let's have a John then. And also, by the way, when you come up, we got a long line here and a long list, so please just ask one question. We've had several follow-up questions. Come on up here, John. Save it for somebody else. How are you doing, Chad? We will go, until you start to.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do it.
Start to get tired, just let us know.
Hi, Chad. My name is John Wolf. This is really exciting. I'm studying directing, and I watched, those three big movies we've been talking about. And one thing I've noticed is that your coverage of the movies are really effective for capturing what's important for the story and for telling the audience where to look. And for me, coverage is such an abstract concept. Whenever I have to think of how I'm going to cover this, I never know where to start. So I was wondering if you have a certain process that you turn to when you think of coverage for a scene, or if for you just inspiration comes immediately, or what do you do?
That's a good question. And in general, I have worked with the same cinematographer for all of my movies. His name is Sean, and we went to film school together. So we've known each other 20 some years. And I lean on him a lot. So in pre-production, we'll shot list together, and we'll do a complete shot list of the movie. We'll just talk about every scene and like how we might want to shoot it. And I'll usually come with like 50 to 60% shots that have been like, that have come to me in a moment of inspiration, and I know for sure I want. And then the rest is like, we're just making it up. And typically we find that when we get on the set and when the actors do it and we see it and we're in an environment, that 40% can change a lot. I like that. I like having like a couple benchmarks we got to hit, but then otherwise keeping it pretty fluid and loose. And I think you just gotta like really, really know the material. And it's kind of like a saying people say about acting, where it's like I was just so in character that I knew like I could improvise and it would be right for the character. And I feel like that's true about all the jobs on the movie set. Like the DP should know that script well enough that when he's improvising, it should feel right for the character and the movie. Like I want everyone in the key creative positions to be like that material is in their bones. So like when we do go off script, it's going to be right, even if we're just like going on instinct. So yeah, that's the main thing. And what you said, like we're always talking about it in terms of the characters and the story. So an example from Little Fish is, I'll give you two quick examples from Little Fish. One is the scene where she holds up the Polaroid and it says "I'm a wife" on the back. And like a more typical way of shooting that would be she holds it up and you could do like an insert of just like of the photo so you can see what it says, and like she'll flip it. And that gets the information across. But we did it with her face in the background, and we racked focus from her face to the photo and back to her face, so that the like emotional reaction of her face was directly tied to the photo, and it's all in the same shot rather than like cutting to an insert just for the sake of the information. And then another example is in the scene where they fight and he says he doesn't want to get the procedure done, and she's like, why? They're like sitting on chairs in the living room facing each other, but we deliberately shot it where we're like dead on Emma, kind of like an over the shoulder of him to Emma. But Jack's coverage is he's by himself and we're shooting it in profile with like just the couch in the foreground. So that was a way where like they're not reaching each other. They're like emotionally in two different places. So like let's film his coverage one way and her coverage another way. So like you feel like they're not really connecting with each other. So, you know, you just try to think about it in terms of not like what's the shot that we can get or what's the shot that's quickest or but really try to just think of make everything deliberate. I'm talking a lot about this, but I really feel like we made an impact with This Is Martin Bonner, which was a very, very, very cheap movie. We made it for like $45,000 and nobody thought it cost that little. And it's not because there's so much like amazing stuff on the screen, but it just feels very deliberate. And you watched it and you got a sense that the people behind the camera weren't just like rushing or weren't trying to get what was convenient. It was just like deliberate. And so I feel like being smart and being deliberate is the best way to put money on the screen.
It was very instructive. Thank you.
All right, and next we have my esteemed colleague, Jarrell Rosales.
Hey, Chad, Jarrell here. I'm actually their directing professor, so I'm low-key grading them, but it is great that you're here. Surprise to my students, we're going to be doing directing actors workshops soon. And I love what you talked about earlier about letting them do their thing first and then step in when you need to. I actually would love to know your process actually, let me ask you this. When you were first starting out directing actors, what was your process and what was the thing you wish you had known earlier? And if there's 3 good tips you can tell them now that will just make their movies better.
Directing actors will never not be a mystery. So just accept it. Because every actor is totally different. And, you know, actors are a very sensitive breed of person. And a lot of times they're thinking differently than you. You're thinking about the movie, they're thinking about the part, the role, and the character. And sometimes they can have like conflicting goals. So it's just a matter of like building a relationship and figuring out how to talk to each one and make them feel safe and valued and free to kind of to mess up and try things. And it's not a science. It's just it's a lot of instinct. And so being a people person, I think really helps. And being someone who can read a room really helps because you are doing a lot of like, what is this person really, what's really going on here? And how can I sidestep having to say directly to their face, you're doing this bad, and come up with a way of, saying that without saying that. So it's just like dealing with people. And I got to be honest, there's been a few times where an actor just is not saying a line well, and I'm watching it and it's not good. And so then I'll try one thing. I'll go up and I'll say like, I don't know what I'll say. I'll be like, remember that this person hates you, whatever it is. And then if they'll do it again, and if it's still not good, like I'm basically out of ideas. It's like, I told you like what to do and you didn't do it. So then like I'll just change the line. Like if it's like just not working after 1 or 2, I can't spend all day trying to figure it out. And at least in the independent productions that I've had. So it's just like I'll change the line. And usually that works. It's just like there's something else, something else just like freshens them up and it changes things. So it's tough, but also fun because it's like, you become best friends with all the actors you work with. I love every actor I've ever worked with like deeply because of the relationship that you build over the course of it. And yeah, I mean, I think it's always a learning process, but it's a fun part of the job.
That's great. And stealing a little bit of that, I hope everyone wrote that down. This is why you got the Spirit Award. I love it. Thanks, Chad.
And if there was something I could have known earlier, I don't know what it would be, because I'm still learning it all as I go. But it is very important. Like, casting is very important. Like, it can sink or swim your movies. So don't settle, and be very be very vigilant in the casting process, so that like you're not stuck on set being like, oh, I should have seen this coming.
That's great. Don't settle, everybody.
Hey, I'm Errol. I'm a senior in the screenwriting track. I wanted to give a shout out to my friend Marshall, who has to leave right now, but he said that the last shot with the aquarium lights turning off, he said it made him jump out of his seat because it was so cool. So
He couldn't wait to leave.
yeah, he's yelling back there. It was so good. Anyway, the question that I had for you was, I know how much rewriting tends to go on once a script is actually like acquired and put into the pipeline. And I read about how with Little Fish, you were like intentionally looking for something you didn't write. So the question that I have is, how much rewriting did you do when you actually got the script and when you were getting ready to make it?
Yeah, so when I came on, like one of the first things I did was work with Mattson, who's a really talented, great writer, about to be like a superstar because he's writing like the new Terminator show. He wrote the new Batman movie. He's very, very in demand writer, and a great dude. So first thing I did was start working with him and like talking about it and finding out where he was coming from on some things and suggesting some things. I think really the only two major contributions I did to the script were I suggested that Ben and Samantha not make it, because I wanted a juxtaposition from their characters to Jude and Emma. Like, I wanted to see someone just be like, I can't deal with it. And in his original draft, like, they stayed together as well. But my point of view is kind of like, if this is a disease happening to everybody, why are we watching these two people specifically? And the answer to that had to be that their love was like so strong and so special that that's why we were watching them. And so I needed to see an example of somebody who also loved a couple who loved each other very, very much, but it still wasn't enough. So that was one thing that happened that I suggested that we went with. And the other was I suggested that they have to do the procedure themselves. In the original draft, he does get selected for the trials and he goes by himself and they're like hooking him up to some crazy machine. And at the last minute, he like chickens out and can't do it. And it was a good scene. It was well written, but I just felt like it was like him not doing it. I didn't want to be a decision that was made by one of them on their own. I was like, this has to be the two of them together making this humongous call. So he rewrote it so that like, and I gave him the option. I was like, I think they should decide together. So like, maybe he doesn't get into the trial and they have to try and do it themselves. And you can decide if you want them to like actually go through with it or if like they both decide at the last minute to chicken out. And I thought for sure he was going to write at the last minute they chicken out, but he sent it back and like they did it. And I was like, oh shit. And I thought that was really cool, and we went with it.
So it was like a collaborative thing that you did with him, not like, oh, I have this script, I can do whatever I want with it, and I'm gonna do it. Okay.
No, although I'm sure that happens, but for me, he was a cool guy and a good writer, and I was like, why wouldn't I use this resource? And like two heads are better than one. Let's like come work on it together. And then he did start working on the Batman right before we started shooting, and then he was like unavailable to help. And so at a certain point, getting close to the shoot, I did just kind of take the final draft file, and if there were little minor tweaks, I would change them. And then some things, practical things in production happened that made us change things, and so I would do that myself. But but I did consider him a valuable resource and wanted to use him.
I love that. Thank you.
All right. I have several colleagues here today, and they're all really excited about this because they have all tons of questions. Jenny McKenzie has a question.
Hi, Chad. Sorry, in transit from one room to the other. It's an amazing film, and I would love to hear about your process for rehearsal, from the first table read to really shooting, and what was that process like?
Yeah, well, coming from This Is Martin Bonner, which cost $45,000 and was totally bare bones, and then Morris from America, which cost more money. It was more of a legitimate production, but Craig couldn't be in Germany until like it was time to shoot. So in both of those films, I didn't get any rehearsal at all. And so that was what I was used to. And then on Little Fish, I had Jack and Olivia in Vancouver, I think 5 days earlier than the shoot. So we had 5 days to work on it, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in that 5 days. Because as I said, I'd never done rehearsals before. And in the end, we didn't do any like, let's act out the scenes kind of stuff. We just spent like those 5 days talking and reading the script and talking about the scenes. And I found that to be very useful for two reasons. One is that it gave me the time to build that relationship I'm talking about with those actors, so that by the time we were on set, I kind of did have a sense of how I needed to talk to Jack or how I needed to talk to Olivia. And we just like, and I also got a sense of like, okay, there maybe like, there's some warning bells about what Jack is saying here. Like he maybe thinks the character is doing something for a different reason than me. So I got to make a mental note of that, and make sure I have good, answers for on the day. If I really want to do it my way, I got to be prepared. And yeah, just let them feel like they were a part of the process. And from those talks, we added a couple things. Like they both felt that there wasn't enough passion in the relationship. And so we added two things. One was the scene where he touches her in the bed, because before that, there was no scene of like actual physical intimacy. And the other was like, in the fight that they have about not doing the procedure, they really like yelled at each other. And that wasn't in like, they added some lines where they could really like take the passion to a higher level on the opposite end of the spectrum. So they wanted to like fight harder and love harder. And both of those additions were great, and very valuable to the final product. So we really just spent the time talking about it and trying to come up with better ideas, and then did no like sort of strict blocking rehearsal kind of stuff. I after now 4 movies without doing it, I'm used to it, and I kind of like saving that spontaneity for the set. I'm sure that'll come back to haunt me one day. Like one time I'll be like, this was a big mistake not having any rehearsals. But so far I've enjoyed it this way.
Beautiful. Duane, I know I'm not supposed to because there's someone in the waiting area. Tell us about shooting the scene with Olivia outside the vet's office where you're pushing in and she's crossing and talking to her mom. That was so unbelievable. Can you just like touch on that?
That would be one of those shots where like just from reading the script, it popped into my head, and I was like, this could be like a oneer, and maybe have her enter an exit frame, and so like that was one that put in the shot list right away. And when we got there, and the way the alley looked, it was like, this is going to be great. We'll just do a slow zoom the whole time. And yeah, Olivia doesn't really know what's going on. She just, because the camera's just sitting really far away from her, and she's pacing back and forth doing her thing. And we weren't sure if it was going to work, so we did like one other shot just in case. But yeah, like popped it into the edit, and I really loved it. And it just felt like it was, the zoom causes the space to compress on her. and the background feel like it's kind of like closing in on her, and it was one that worked out.
It was amazing. Thank you so much. Great work.
Thanks.
Hello, my name is Sarah. I'm a senior and I'm studying actually sound for film. And my question is, every element in your film fits together so well. How do you communicate your vision for the film to the people you are working with?
It's not easy. I don't know, you know, I also feel like you have to stay open to the film telling you a little bit how it wants to feel and sound and look. Because if you had asked me right before we started, like what Morris from America is going to be like in the end, I would have thought it would have been more kind of like European art house austere. Like I always intended it to be a mix of like European coming of age art house movies like The 400 Blows mixed with like American teen coming of age movies like American Pie. And I was like, this is going to be a weird mix. I don't know if it's going to work. But I probably thought it was going to be way more of like a European art house movie. But then when we were making it and like Craig and Marquise were doing their stuff and it was just like so warm and so funny, and I could start to tell that like that side of it was going to take over and like that stuff was going to be the real heart of it. So I had to listen to that. And then on Little Fish, like the producers specifically asked me to like not make it so sad. And I was like, of course it's not gonna be that sad. Like, no, this is like it's gonna have all these moments of levity and light, but it's, and like when we made it, it was like it's turning out to be pretty sad. So, you know, when you get into the editing room and if you can't like go against that and be like, well, let's try like all these let's make the score nice and peppy so that like this scene feels like it's got more romantic bop. And that's like a real note you'll get. Be like, can this score be like boppier here so that it's more romantic? And like, I get why they wanted that, but I just had to be like, I don't think so. Like, it's just gotta, this is what it feels like. It feels like it's this, it's telling me it wants to be romantic, but in a more melancholy way. And so, yeah, it's kind of just being open to what like other collaborators are bringing. So like Keegan is the composer and he's also someone that I've known since film school and have worked with all the time. And so he's writing stuff as we're shooting and he's writing just based on having read the script once, and he'll send me those pieces of score. And sometimes I'll hear one and I'll just be like, oh yeah, this is amazing. And one of the things that's in the movie he sent to me while we were shooting, and it just like kind of started to shift me into leaning into that more melancholy direction because I started to hear his music and see what that could be in the movie. So that didn't answer your question about how to communicate vision, but I feel like my job is not necessarily to be like to tell everyone exactly what it needs to sound or be like. It's more allowing Keegan to send me tracks that he did on his own after reading the script, or like letting the sound designer do a pass and then seeing if they did something that I never would have thought of. Like Josh Crockett, the editor, in his very first cut, he did the thing in the scene where Jude is being interviewed for the trial and someone drops something in the back and he turns and looks, and we see him do it twice from two different angles. He looks twice. Like, I would not have thought of that, and he just did it because it's something that came to him and I loved it, so we kept that in. And so I like to just kind of let everybody try to put their stamp on it, and then yeah, my job is more to just accept or push back on things that don't feel right, and then the end product is kind of like, I didn't know that this was going to be like this.
Very cool. Thanks so much.
Okay, how are you holding up?
I'm good.
Excellent. We do have, this has never happened before. We have yet another of my esteemed colleagues. Mr. Spencer Plew, do you have a question?
Thanks, Duane. Yes, my name is Spencer Plew. I'm a part-time visual effects teacher at UVU, and I noticed in Little Fish that you have a repeated symbol going on, which is the no faces symbol. Like at first we see it with the model in the photograph with her face covered. Later we see that in your face effect, which was really well done. I loved the way this was shot of when Jack's character is trying to remember his wedding, and he can't remember the faces of the attendees aside from his friends. And there was like this smear in the middle. Like again, there's no face there, but then by the end of the movie, I remembered that one more example of that symbol is the face masks that people generally were wearing every now and then, especially in that scene where he's being interviewed for the trials. And I thought that's like so symbolic of forgetting faces, like going through this a long time. Was that always on your mind, like to try to find opportunities to put that symbol in there? And if I might also ask, were there other like visual hints or visual themes that you wanted to have prominent in the film?
Yeah, the obscured faces was something that kind of came deliberately and early. And I like to pull photographs when I'm making like lookbooks and early, like trying to come up with what the movie is going to look like. And I pulled a lot of photographs of people like with partially obscured faces. It would be like a balloon or something. Like that's kind of what I wanted it to be like. I didn't when I think I do have face blindness in real life, where it's really hard for me to remember someone's face like the next day. So I just wanted to kind of try and capture that, where it's like, you know, the memory is there, you remember everything about it except like the little details of a person. And we try to do that with like objects getting in the way, or like the effects, the thing at the wedding, we just put a prism in front of the camera and shot it that way, which was a test we had done in advance, just to like try different effects in camera of like how we could make things look weird. And Sean and I both really loved that one, so we did that. So yeah, but in terms of the face masks, like I didn't really put that together as something that was also like obscuring faces. And you know, we shot the movie before COVID, obviously, and so like the face mask, you know, I don't even remember whose idea it was. It was probably the production designer's idea, and we were like, I don't know, like we kind of want to see his face for this scene, won't we? So we kind of went back and forth on it, and then in the end decided that they would wear it, but like at a certain point he takes it off. So that one was not part of the overall schematic, and now of course for multiple reasons like that, the mask stuff sticks out. And I'm just thankful that he wore it correctly, because now everybody is like hyper aware of how to wear a mask. So yeah, the faces came from photographs that I would pull, and I was like inspiration, and then I was just like, this could be something cool, because we did have to come up with inexpensive, creative ways to achieve our visual effects. This is still a low budget movie, all things considered. And so it was a case of like smearing Vaseline on the lens, or using that prism, or like a specific lens that deliberately obscures the edges, things like that.
Great, thanks, Chad, very much. Love the movie very much.
Hey, Chad, I am Sophie. I am studying audio as well. So my question has to do with that. I thought the sound design in this movie was pretty brilliant with all of your sound cues and how it worked well together. And I wanted to know how much of that you had in mind before you guys were shooting, or like while you were shooting, what came up, or was it all in post-production?
I'm sure there's some specific stuff that I knew in advance. And in general, like I do try to come up with a North Star for everybody. And it's like, what's the North Star for this? And that was the idea. The theme was like, the gradual erasure of a person. And so like, how can we make every technical aspect reflect that? And so when I talked to the composer, it was like, maybe there's a theme for the movie, a musical theme that we can repeat a couple times, but every time we repeat it, like one instrument is missing, or you take out like one little bit of the melody. And so like each time you hear it, it's a little bit different and a little bit degraded. And same thing with the production designer. It'd be like, maybe like at this point in the movie, these photos on their nightstand, like that used to be a picture of them is now just like a blank image, which we did. And it's not stuff that like you're necessarily supposed to notice, but it's just when any of the crafts people have a question or a thought, it's something that they can refer to themselves, and I don't have to always answer everything. So I would hope that the sound people and everybody took it to heart and is like, okay, well, as I'm approaching this scene, like, what do I really want to do? Well, let me think back on what, you know, the North Star for everybody is on this and see if I can figure it out.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, we only have somebody just jumped on. 4 more questions. Is that good for you?
Yeah.
Okay, Lucas Hamilton.
Hey, I'm Lucas Hamilton. I'm a freshman. Kind of touched on this earlier, but you've directed both movies that you've written and non-written. What are some differences or challenges that you face when directing something that you have not written?
Very good question. And the answer is pretty simple. Like, This Is Martin Bonner and Morris from America came from me, and I spent like a couple years writing them and a couple more years putting them together. And all during that time, like, I'm thinking about it constantly, and I'm like listening to the songs that I imagine are going to be in it. And I'm just like immersed in the imaginary worlds of those movies, like trying to manifest them into existence. With Little Fish, I read it, and like 4 months later, we were making it. And so I always, like, every time you direct something, especially in the beginning, you don't really know what you're doing. It's like you have to kind of learn on the job for many different reasons. So like, it's a fake it till you make it kind of scenario. And I always drew my confidence. I was like, well, I don't necessarily know how to direct things technically, but at least I know that I'm the expert on this script. Like, nobody knows this material better than me. So that's what qualifies me to be the director, more so than anybody. And like, that's how I drew my confidence. And then with Little Fish, I was not that person. And I was like, oh no, where am I going to draw my confidence? And it was like a sprint to like make up for all that lost time and pass Mattson in being the premier expert of the material. And like, if someone has a question, they got to come to me because I know it better than anyone else. And that's really like what you have to be as the director, is like, you don't necessarily have to know how to execute everything. You just have to know, like, when someone comes and asks, do you want this wall to be here or there? The reason they're asking you is because you know the material. And so I found it very challenging, and also like kind of, I was insecure at first about not being that person, and then really trying to hustle into becoming that person. So that was the challenge. But that's the trade-off. Like, I didn't have to waste 4 years, like, pushing a rock up a mountain. It might happen much faster.
Thank you. Yeah. Good movie.
Thanks.
I enjoyed it.
Hello, Chad. My name is also Lucas. My question is, for you personally, what is your approach to the pre-production process of like storyboard, shot list, and floor plan? Like, how involved do you like to be in that with your director of photography or writer? And then what was the difference between this film and your films previously where you had written them?
I love pre-production because you really start to feel like the movie's coming together. And also it forces you to make decisions. I'll try to do this really quickly. A quick example of like how I made, and this is Martin Bonner, like I had already made a no budget movie in Luke and Brie are on a first date, and I didn't want to have to do it again. So I was trying to raise like $250,000 to make This Is Martin Bonner. And I had a producer helping, but neither of us knew how to raise money. So it was like going very slowly. And in the meantime, I went up to Reno where my like relatives live, and I started scouting around just to feel productive. And there was a scene that took place in the mall. So I went to the mall in Reno and I said, how much would it cost to shoot here? And they said $11,000. And so I wrote $11,000 into our hypothetical budget. Came back and like kept trying to raise money. Nothing happened for another year. And then a full year later, I went back to Reno and I was like, we're making this movie no matter what. Like, if we don't have any money, we don't have any money. We're just going to figure it out. And then I went to the mall again and I said, listen, we don't have $11,000. I really need to shoot in the mall. How much can you give it to us for? And they were like, $11,000. And so I rewrote that scene to not take place in a mall anymore. And like, that's the difference between getting a movie made and not getting a movie made, is instead of filing it away in a hypothetical budget, I was just like, okay, this takes place in a different place now. And we got the movie made. So pre-production to me is where you start making the decisions that turn the movie into the movie. And that's fun and exciting. But I don't do a lot of storyboards, partly because like the films that I was making they don't really require it. And we did do some on Little Fish, but it was just the cinematographer and me like doing little sketches that are bad. Yeah, like it's not really floor plans as well. Like because I have such a strong relationship with him and we work together so many times, we don't have to talk that way. I just like, I know he's going to light it in a way that's going to be right for the movie. And if it's not, in the rare instance, I can just tell him really quickly, but I trust him to do his thing. And yeah, and it's more about just like trying to keep it fresh for the set. And then pre-production is like, I mean, there's always something else to do. Like there's a million things you're doing and it's fun. Another quick example about making decisions is just so dumb. And on Morris from America, there's a long scene where Craig Robinson gives a monologue while driving a car. And so everyone knew that we needed to find a long stretch of road where we could drive a car over the course of this monologue. And so like the location scout went out and tried to find some roads, and they came back to me and they put 2 printed out sheets of paper of Google Maps taken from the moon. And they were like, which one of these roads do you like better? And at that moment, I was thinking like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, but I have to say one of these roads, like that's my job. So I just said that one. And then when, of course, we went to it and it didn't work and he just changed it. But I was like, that was a lesson where I was like, oh, directing is just kind of like making decisions. And you know, you can always change them later, but like in that moment in time, I just needed to be the guy that picked the road from the shot of the moon.
Sounds good, man. Thanks.
All right, we have Moses. The poses.
Hello, Moses here. I hope you all can hear me. I'm in my first month of college at all. And I just wanted to say that I love the movie and that there were 2 specific parts that I especially loved that really like hit me. One was towards the end of the movie where we were now seeing that the main character was gaining the sickness, and we saw parts of the movie that we had seen before, but they were ever so slightly different. I really loved that. And then the other part was how you showed that the beginning was actually the ending, but you told us that right in the middle of the movie. And I wanted to hear how you decided to make that all happen, like how you directed that.
It's a good question, and a lot of discussion and thought went into this, because I mean, it was in the script that in the middle of the movie, she says, "Do you remember meeting me?" And they talk about the water park. And so, and it was also in the script that in the end you see that you watch the first scene, you watch the ending scene first. So it was never different in the script. But so, and I never thought of the movie as having like a twist ending. So but it was just like a very delicate thing. It was like, what do we want to happen at this midpoint in the movie? Do we want everyone to just know for sure? Do we want like no one to know? Is it okay if like half the audience knows? And ultimately we ended up being like, I guess the ideal is that everyone's going to be like, wait a second, this is how they met. So then the ending or the beginning was not how they met. But we had hoped that because of the way the rest of the movie was playing, that you would just like have a kernel of doubt in the back of your mind that maybe this was just another example of someone misremembering something. And then in the end, like, it's not supposed to be like the craziest, hugest surprise in the end when it comes back to the beginning. It's meant to feel like the only way it possibly could end. And so it's hopefully still satisfying, even if you thought that might be the case. But it did require a lot of work. And so like in the script and when we shot it, she says, "Do you remember meeting me?" And Jack says, "Clear as day," and then tells the story. And in editing, we were like, maybe he shouldn't say clear as day. Maybe he should just say, "Oh, I remember a water park." So he doesn't like explicitly say that is definitely when they first met. And it was like stuff like that, where it was just like the smallest of margins between like everybody. We didn't want everyone to be like, "Oh, well, now I don't have to watch this movie anymore." But it was okay if they like started to have some doubts. So very tricky. And ultimately it seems like from the feedback we've gotten that like we found the right balance.
For sure. Yeah, one more question for you. Thank you, Moses. Great question. Oh, Wes too. There's two. I'm sorry. Is you okay with two more?
Yeah.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi. My
name's Ben Frazier. I'm a junior. I loved Morris from America. It was so fun and heartfelt. I want to circle back to something that you were talking about earlier and that I read about as well, how you took pieces of your own life for Morris from America, and then you kind of adapted that into a character. And so there's a little piece of yourself in all of the characters that you make. This is a writing question. So usually I try to do the same thing, and sometimes I run into problems. Do you usually start with yourself and then add the unique elements of that character? Or do you start with the unique elements of that character and then add yourself? And then also with movies that are so character driven, like Martin Bonner and Morris from America, rather than plot driven, at what point in your process do you begin to think about plot with such character driven movies?
Well, for the writing part, I definitely start with myself first and then add the details. And also I don't really outline the movies, which is probably obvious. But I'll come up with the first idea. And in the case of Morris, it was that pillow humping scene. And in the case of Martin Bonner, it was just my dad really moved to a town when he was 55 and he didn't know anybody for a job and had to start over. And it was just like, well, how's my dad going to make new friends? Is he even going to try? And those were like the two first kernels. And so from there, I don't immediately start writing. I just think on the ideas and then wait for other things to come. And another thing that I took from my own life in Morris from America is that when I was 12, I really had a gangster rap phase, and I wrote the lyrics, "Fucking all the bitches 2 at a time." And then my mom did find it in my notebook, and I got in big trouble, but I got in trouble because of the cursing. And I just thought, wouldn't it be funny if I got in trouble, not because of the cursing, but because these lyrics are bad? And so then that really unlocked, it was like, okay, then what kind of parent would care more about that than the cursing? And it's like, oh, a parent that's really into the like integrity of hip hop. And so it was just like a long process of thinking. And I can only sit down to start writing it when I feel like I've got 4 or 5 good scenes in my head. And then I just can do the filler. It's like, all right, I know I got to write this to get to that good scene. And then I know I got to write whatever comes between that scene and that scene. But in the thinking process, I think is where some of the specifics come in. And it's like, I'm thinking about myself and then being like, okay, well, what's better than my story? What's more interesting than my story? Yeah, so I by the time I do sit down to write, a lot of it's kind of formed in a hazy picture in my brain. And then what was the other part of the question?
Yeah, you answered both of them about the character and then about introducing the plot.
Oh yeah, and then introducing the plot. Yeah, that's kind of like if I can come up with events that sort of tie these things all together. Like I don't care about plot necessarily. I'm not like a very plot-driven filmmaker, but I also don't feel like, or I don't want to be an antagonistic filmmaker. I don't want people to be bored in my movies. I want there to be new information in every scene or something that gets you from A to B to C to like, so I do have like an element of traditionalism, even though like straight plot is not something I feel like I really need to adhere to.
Awesome. Yeah, that was really interesting. I was super curious where the hip hop element came from in that movie.
Yeah, it was my bad lyrics from age 12.
All right, Wes.
Hey, what's up? My name's Wes, and I'm a senior, and I'm an editor. My question's actually editing related. Talking about tone and kind of just the feel of the film, how do you kind of establish the tone, like I guess reestablish the tone in the edit, and like what point do you bring on the editor to kind of like, hey, this is what I'm thinking, and then make the story more cohesive like that?
Well, the second part, the editor on this one, Josh, he was in Vancouver while we were shooting, and he was cutting while we were shooting, but I'm not sure why, because I never talked with him or met with him, and he doesn't live in Vancouver. So they just like plucked him away from his family to start working on the movie where we were, even though I never saw him. I guess it was in case something really went wrong in shooting and we could figure it out quickly. But no, in all the other instances, it's been when we wrap, then the editor starts and I let them do their own cut all by themselves. And then I come in and watch and we start working together from there. And usually like the instance of him looking twice, there'll be like 3 or 4 things that the editor has done that I had never would have thought of. And so like just those alone justify letting them do a complete pass, even though it's painful to wait to get in there. And in terms of reestablishing the tone, it was never, This Is Martin Bonner was what it was from beginning to end. But Morris from America, like I mentioned, it did start to lean more towards like kind of a warm father-son movie than I initially thought. And that was maybe not any more deliberate than just being like, this is good stuff. Let's like keep the scene in longer. And not like as calculated as like, let's like shift the tone more. It's just like, I start by like, if anything is not great, like throw it out. Like you'd be very surprised how much you can get away with losing. You like always feel like, oh, but if they don't know this piece of information, they won't get that. Like it's always fine. Like you can lose almost anything. So if something's not right because my shot isn't good or the actor just didn't nail it, like I just get rid of it and let's see if we can live without it. And then it's kind of like building from there. And tone usually comes later. Tone usually comes from like the music and the sound, if it's going to change drastically from what we had shot. So yeah.
Cool. Thanks so much, and thanks for chatting with us all night. So
Yeah, no problem. This is fun for me because like we didn't have a traditional festival tour, or I never got to see the movie in a theater with anybody and do a Q&A, which, you know, for the other movies was the greatest joy, like having worked so hard and then getting a chance to fly around the world and like talk to people in all different places and hear what they thought about it is like, that's the best part. So the biggest drag for me in releasing a movie during the pandemic was missing out on that. So thank you guys for letting me do it.
Oh, well, this has been a really great honor for us. It was a fantastic film. And, you know, I'm really happy with these guys. They did a lot of very diligently researched and binged and came up with all sorts of great questions about your whole body of work, which is fantastic. So good luck on your, I'm going to end with a story. I was in Edinburgh, right? And there was this security guard at a place we were trying to get into the film, and he started talking. He found out I was a filmmaker, started talking to me. He said, "Oh, you know that I can't do his accent, so I'll fake it, but it's nothing like what it was." I could hardly understand him. He said, "Do you know the director Sidney Pollack?" I was like, "Yeah, for sure." He goes, "Well, what's his best movie?" And I said, "I don't know, maybe Tootsie." No. I said, "Maybe Out of Africa." No. And I said, 3 Days of the, that's the greatest movie ever made. He didn't even let me finish. 3 Days of the Condor, that's the greatest movie ever made. And I was very, very happy I came up with the fact that Sidney Pollack had directed 3 Days of the Condor. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's a heavy inspiration to live in the shadow of. But so Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind loomed large over this project too. And I, when I first read the script, I was a little nervous because I think that's a perfect movie. And I was like, I don't know, like, I don't want to risk just being like a ripoff of that great movie. And I brought it up to Mattson when I first met with him, and I was like, aren't you worried about being compared to Eternal Sunshine and how, like, you know, even the beginning and end is on a beach just like that? And he was like, nah. It's like, that movie's like 20 years old, and like there's room for another great movie about memory. And he was so unflappably confident about it that I was like, yeah, there can be another great movie about it. So yeah, that really helped me. And yes, like this next one, if it happens, it's also like going to be compared to giants, but what's the point of doing anything if it's not difficult?
For sure. Thank you so much, Chad. It's been a great honor, and everyone give him a big hand.
Thank you, Chad. Amazing.
Thank you, guys. Best of luck in your school year.
I can't really, never mind. Anyway, have a great night, sir. Thank you for hanging out with us.